Normally when I make my YouTube videos out in the field doing landscape photography, I try to share with you as much as I can about what's going on. But there are times when the light's changing rapidly, when I'm under a bit of time pressure, and sometimes I can't always find a way to share exactly what's changing, what's happening with the scene, what's happening with the conditions, and what's happening in my mind at the time. Now, if there's a little bit of that, maybe a quick voiceover on the video might work, but in my last shoot we definitely had some time pressures. The light was gorgeous but very, very fleeting, and there were quite a few things that happened in there that I didn't get around to talking about in the video. So I've decided to do another video looking back at my last video, and I'm going to share with you all the things that I didn't tell you in that last one. I hope you'll enjoy it. If you do and you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. Okay, so in my last video I took several images out on the local beach. The conditions changed very rapidly from good to bad to fantastic to okay. And there were quite a lot of things going on kind of in the background that I just really didn't have the time to talk to camera about. So in this video I'm going to look back at some specific segments from that video and talk you through what was going on. And I want to start off with the first image that I shared, and it was this one, and I actually put a little message up on screen in the video saying that I wasn't convinced it had actually worked. So I wanted to look at why I shot it and then what I think is actually wrong with it. So let's start off with a quick look at what was going on in the video. Not the scene I came out for this morning, but I did set up a quick composition looking down at this rock down here in the foreground, rocks in the background, and some nice colours in the sky. I took that image because when I arrived on scene, or actually in fact as I was walking down, there were some really nice reds and purples and magentas in the sky. But by the time I got there they were starting to fade, and I honestly thought that it was quite likely we weren't going to get any more colour. So I kind of rushed around trying to find a scene to shoot, and I ended up picking this one. So what's wrong with this image? Well, let's start off with this band of rocks across here. They're quite heavy, and they kind of block the scene in. They're not letting the eye flow through the scene as much as I would have liked. And then, although when I first set this shot up, or as I was setting it up, the colours in the sky up here were much stronger and they were reflected much more in the midground here. But by the time I'd actually got set up and shot it, the colours had started to fade in this midground. And what that means is that midground starts to get a bit there. It's kind of dead space. It doesn't really add anything much, whereas if the colours had been more prominent in there it might have worked. And then finally we've got the rock that I chose for the foreground, which, although it's kind of interesting with all the little holes in it, it doesn't really stand out well enough. It doesn't look pretty enough. And all in all, I just think it's not a horrible image, it's not a dreadful image, but I don't think it really works all that well. And I must admit, as I said, I thought at the time this might have been the only light I was going to get, because what you didn't see in the video, because I didn't video it, was just after I shot this, all of the colours faded completely. It went very flat, very dull. And I must admit, I didn't think anything much was going to happen. So it was probably a good 5 or 6 minutes of dead, boring, flat tones in the sky. and then the colours started to come back, and that's when I started to think that maybe we had some potential for the photo shoot to continue and to do something interesting. So let's go and have a little look at what was going on. Now, I've been kind of worrying about the composition of this, but I've just decided to go for something really simple. Above the horizon we've got those gorgeous coloured skies, and then reflected in the water down here we've got those gorgeous coloured skies. What was the image that I got? Well, there it is. Now, I almost made the mistake of that I'd made in the first one of trying to find some kind of foreground element to include in here, and there just wasn't anything there that was going to work. But as these tones started to spread across the sky and reflect in the waters in the pool, I realised that it gave me all of the interest that I needed. You can see some of the rocks beneath the water because the pool is fairly shallow and still, but everything's reflected, the colours are gorgeous, and this image is about the sky and about the reflections. There was a decision that I had to make here, and that is, do I bring the line of the rocks up to the horizon? So in other words, do I take the camera as low down as possible and get the line of rocks up to the horizon, or do I allow a gap between the rocks and the horizon where we've got some more sea in there, just to give it more of a sense of place? I chose to have a little bit of a gap, so the rocks are just below the horizon. If I was doing it again, I'd probably do the same thing, because I actually think it looks better this way. But there is an argument for maybe, you know, maybe what I could have done is done a second shot with the camera a bit lower, and just put those rocks on the horizon line for improved symmetry. But in all honesty, I like it the way it is. While I was shooting this, I was also keeping an eye on something else. So let's go back and have a look at the video just to see what was going on behind me. Is the horizon. Just below the horizon we've got the rocks. So I'm going to freeze it there, because what you can perhaps see over in the background there is Puig Campana mountain, and it's got some really nice clouds across the sky, beautiful colours across the sky, and I was keeping one eye on that. Now on the one hand that looked quite nice, but the mountain, I don't know how well it shows in the video, but the mountain was completely dark. There was no light on it, it was flat, it was just a silhouette, and I didn't think there was an image there at all. It was only a little bit later, as the sun sort of came up a little bit higher, that we started to get some light on the mountain, and it started to look as if it might be interesting. So again, let's kind of fast forward a little bit on the video. So at this point we were starting to get light on the mountain, and that means we were also getting a bit of a reflection of the tones of that light in some of the rock pools, and I went off searching for a potential composition. My first attempt was getting sort of wide angle down in the rock pool, trying to get low down, but to be honest, even with the camera, you know, that high out of the water, it just wasn't working. And also with the wide angle, the mountain looked really small, it just didn't work as a scene. And that's when I went back, took a bit more distance into the scene, put the long lens on and tried to get a shot that way. And that ultimately worked, but here's where I have to make a little bit of a confession, that the sequence of events that I showed in the video is not actually, strictly speaking, the way it happened. Well, it did, but the filming was out of sequence. I'll get to that bit in the video and I'll show you what I mean. We're actually at sunrise now, and the colours have all faded. There's some really nice light on the scene out there, but only for a matter of probably seconds. Okay, and this is where I need to make that slight confession. You see, what actually happened was there was light on the mountain. It wasn't a massive amount, but there was a bit. And I quickly composed the image, put the circular polarizer on, took the shot, quickly filmed the screen on the back of the camera, and then decided that what I really should have is some B-roll of some of the setup. So I then took the circular polarizer off and then put it back on again to show the setup for the shot. Now, by the time I had done that, the light had gone off of the mountain. But if you look at this clip here, which, as I said, was done before I filmed that bit of B-roll, this is the back of the camera, and you can see there is light on the mountain. Not a lot, but a bit. And the circular polarizer is just helping to pull that out a bit. Do you know what? I actually really like this image. The mountain has got a lovely glow on it. The sky isn't all that impressive. It's, you know, it's got some streaks across it which are quite nice, but the vibrant colours in the sky from earlier have gone. But we've got a nice little bit of a reflection in that pool in the foreground. And there's lots of nice detail being picked out in the mid-ground and the first part of the background. You can see the hill of Righteous Yoma and the tower on top. There's buildings here at the northern end of Campeo. And I actually really like this image. And there is, I guess there was a potential opportunity here if I'd thought further ahead. And maybe what I could have done is composed this shot when the sky was nicer, and taken the shot, and then kept the composition the same and taken the shot with the nice light on the mountain and merged the two of them together. But to be honest, I couldn't really see that composition until the light hit the mountain. It just wasn't registering on me. So all in all, I'm not entirely sure that having a much nicer sky in there would add much to the image. The image as it stands is about the light on the mountain and the reflections in the rock pool and, you know, the contours of the land. And a really nice sky might actually draw the eye away from all of that. In fact, there is one thing about this image that I really don't like. And it's the fact that there's a fisherman here, and actually his bag sitting on a rock. He's got a rucksack sitting on a rock here. Now, I don't mind the fact that there's a person in the frame, but what I don't like about it, and what keeps drawing my eye in, is the way he's positioned. Because of the angle I shot at, his body breaks the line between the sea and the land in the background, and I just find it really distracting. Fortunately, he's very small in the frame, so 30 seconds or less in Photoshop. After that, the heron came back. I'd been watching this heron for quite a while. It kept coming in and landing a long distance off and then flying off again and landing and flying off. It was obviously hunting. And it came back, and I ended up trying to get a shot of it. I still had the camera set up on the tripod from the previous shot. The heron's back down there, just sitting right on the shoreline. If I try and get close to it, it's going to fly away. And this is the image that I got. Now, originally I intended this to be a much wider shot, because this has been cropped in quite a bit, because the mountain was all sitting up, you know, up here somewhere. But the heron was just too small in the frame. It just didn't work. So I've cropped this in quite a lot. And I quite like it, but I think the problem is the background is quite distracting. Although it's quite nice to see the heron in the environment, the background is perhaps a bit distracting. And if it had been the only shot of the heron that I got, I'd probably been quite happy with it, but it wasn't.
because as I was walking back,
just walking back, and I've come across the heron again, so I'm going to try and get some handheld shots of it. Don't know if it's going to work or not.
Okay, so I spotted the heron while I was walking back, quickly dumped the bag, got the camera back out, got the 70-200 lens on, and then proceeded to try and creep up on the heron wearing Wellington boots on a pebbly beach. It's not the easiest thing to do. But in the end, I did manage to get a couple of shots of the heron, which I deemed good enough to share. What I didn't say was, how I'd set the camera up, because I knew there was a possibility the heron might move, and I might need to be reacting very quickly. I actually shot in aperture priority mode. I bumped the ISO up to 800, I think, and I took the widened the aperture, both to speed up the exposure time, but also because I felt that I would probably want to blur the background more to isolate the heron from the image, from the rest of the scene. So I ended up with two shots, one of them while I was creeping up on the heron, which is this one. Now, I'm no wildlife photographer, and it's not an award-winning shot. It's not really doing much other than sitting there, but I actually quite like it. It stands out well, it's got good detail, it's sharp, and it's got quite a nice pose, the colours are good. Now, of course, then I was trying to sneak up on the heron, and I don't know if it was me or the fisherman that was moving around on the other side, but the heron then took flight. And I was using a high-speed continuous shooting mode on the camera, and I took about 6 or 7 shots as it flew past. And the shot that I really wanted, fortunately, also came out nice and sharp. The autofocus nailed the heron as it flew past, and that was this one, which has got a little bit of warm tones in the sky in the background, and I managed to capture that sort of curling, part of that curling wave in the foreground, with a nice bit of light that the heron's flying over, and it's creating a little bit of a reflection. Again, it's not going to win any awards for wildlife photography, but I quite like it as an image, and it rounded off the day quite nicely. There's a very short sneak peek of the next video coming up at the end of this, so hang on for a few seconds to see that. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, well, give it a like, share it on social media, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. And if you're new here and you've enjoyed this and you like this kind of thing, then don't forget to hit subscribe before you go. And finally, as always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, so thank you very much. And until that next video, which you're just about to see a sneak peek of, thank you very much for watching. Bye.
I've come out today with some special equipment. Slightly disappointing. And what we've got out there in the distance, it's on a clear view of it, it's difficult to see.